They said every alpha dreams of finding their mate. I said every fool dreams of fairy tales, not me. The training hall reeked of sweat and iron. Wood platforms, the color of old tea, lined the floor like islands, scuffed with the ghosts of 1,000 falls. Racks of blunt weapons leaned along one wall, pitted from use. A bell clanged in the corner, lazy, off-tempo, while a pair of youngsters slammed into each other and bounced off like badly thrown knives. I stood at the threshold with my bag slung over one shoulder and the kind of expression that tells people nothing and everything at once. I'd learned that expression in Exile. It says, "Try me. You're Cass, right?" The boy who approached had shoulders too broad for his sense of caution. Eager eyes, a bruise fading yellow along the jaw. Omega, if the way he kept flicking his gaze toward the exits was any clue. "Depends who's asking," I said. "Rin," he said, as if that explained anything. "They said you're here to train us. Some of us are quick studies." "Translation," I said. "You're impatient." He grinned, then killed the grin when a senior alpha barked across the room for him to get back to drills. He jogged off with a shuffled salute. A cluster of teens watched me openly. I heard one whisper, "That's the outsider, the feral one," like I wasn't within arm's reach and my hearing wasn't excellent. Feral. I'd been called worse by people who didn't mean it as a compliment. A woman in a linen vest, logistics, by the look of her, came to take my name and my contract. I handed over both. The contract was all neat print and little traps, schedules, expectations, delicately phrased liabilities. "Teach discipline," it said. "Reinforce boundaries." It didn't say don't break them, but the implication was baked in. They always hoped my edges had dulled. "Coach Cass," the woman said carefully, as if the title might bite. "We have the main platform for instruction. You're free to use the weapons rack, but try not to scare the younger ones." I set my bag down. "I don't scare kids," I said. "Reality does." She said, like she'd just remembered an urgent appointment elsewhere. I walked onto the nearest platform and clapped once. The sound cracked through the hall, sharp, cold. Heads turned, conversation died like a candle snuffed. "Line up," I said. "I don't know your names, and I don't need them yet. Today we're learning something you can't put on a chart." A few exchanged glances that said, "Who does he think he is?" I let the question live. Answers taste better when earned. They formed two lines. Alphas to the left, Omegas to the right, though a few hovered on the seam like they couldn't decide which cliff to leap from. The clan had sorted them. I didn't argue with local customs on day one. I only sharpened them. "First lesson," I said. "You're not your designation on a good day. You're your worst day. You're the moment you're hungry, tired, cornered, and someone who wants what's yours breathes down your neck. I train that person, not the version of you that slept 8 hours and ate warm soup." "Warm soup?" someone muttered. "Second lesson," I said. "A joke is a weapon. Use it well, and you keep blood inside your body a little longer." A ripple of half-laughter rolled through the Omegas. The Alphas tried not to smile. Alphas always try not to smile unless they own the room. I stepped into the space between the lines and felt it change around me, elastic, like air drawn taut over a drum. We started with footwork. The wood flexed under our boots, a friendly give that punished complacency. I touched shoulders, adjusted stances, knocked wrists with the back of my knuckles when someone got lazy. I moved the cocky ones to the front, and the timid ones into the storm of motion so they'd have to learn to breathe under pressure. "Your center," I told a tall alpha who leaned like a willow, "is not a theory. It's a feeling. Find it or fall. Your choice." He scowled at me. He found it. To a small Omega, with watchful eyes, I said, "You don't have to be loud to be dangerous. Keep your blade close. You'll move faster when you believe you deserve the space you take." Her mouth did a tiny rebellion of a smile. She slid into a stance so compact and clean I wanted to nod. I didn't. Praise is a spice. Too much and no one tastes the meal. We moved to partner drills. The room warmed with friction and ego. I feinted, they fell. I set them back on their feet and made the point again, without words. An hour in, sweat painted us in honest colors, and even the bell had stopped pretending to keep time. "Coach," Rin panted, bracing hands on his thighs. Do you believe in it? In bonds?" My jaw ticked, an old habit I hadn't shaken. Believe in gravity, I said. Believe in knives. Bonds are stories people tell when they want their choices made for them. So, no, he said, and grinned again because kids like answers that sound like rebellion. A senior alpha, square build, scar across the nose, stepped up on the platform. Coach Cass, he said flatly, we don't talk about bonds that way here. We just did, I said. Consider it cross-cultural exchange. He took a breath. He wanted a fight. He wanted the room to see him plant a flag in my ribs. Part of me wanted it too. Easy problems feel like rest after hard ones. Back to drills, I said to the room, without looking away from him. You? I nodded at the senior alpha. With me, we circled. The hall hushed in that specialized way only people who love violence can manage, reverent, expectant. He lunged. I yielded a hair. He overcommitted. I pivoted and hooked his ankle. He hit the wood with a respectable thud. Again, he said, horse. We went again. He landed a shoulder in my ribs that would blossom into a bruise by nightfall. I let the sting ground me. On the third exchange, I chose the moment and took his balance like a coin from a distracted palm. He lay blinking at the ceiling, breathing hard, then surprised himself by laughing. Enough, I told him, and offered my hand. He took it. We were both sweating, both annoyed, both alive. The room exhaled. You fight like a storm's eye, he said grudgingly. Quiet then. Then the roof's gone, I said. Yes. Hydration break. They scattered toward the water urns. I stood near the edge of the platform and let the ache in my side burn itself into something clean. Outside, wind pressed its shoulder to the shutters. It smelled like rain considering its options. Coach Cass. The voice slid into the hall like a ribbon pulled through a ring. Soft, unapologetic. Every head turned as if jerked by the same string. I turned last. He stood in the doorway the way some people stand on a cliff, with the world behind them and nothing beneath their feet but faith. Taller than me by a shade, lean, the sort of posture that comes from decisions made and kept. His hair was dark and careless at the edges, like he'd run out of time before he could be anything but himself. The white of his shirt was a deliberate choice in this room of scuffs and sweat, and it should have made him fragile. It didn't. His eyes found me, and for a fraction the space between us felt like it had edges. The woman from logistics straightened. The senior alpha smoothed his mouth into respect. The kids stood like posts. The air moved differently. Clan head, someone whispered. So, this was Maer. Welcome, he said, and the word landed like a collar and a kindness at once. I'm told you're the instructor we waited for. I didn't bow. I've never been good at pretending my spine is decorative. I'm the instructor you hired, I said. Waiting was your choice. A flicker of something like amusement passed through his gaze, then vanished into a calm so complete it felt like a dare. You have my hall, he said. Use it to make them strong. Use it to make them brave. And use it to remind them that strength without judgment is just noise. And bonds? Rin blurted, then winced when half the room glared at him. Maer's eyes didn't leave mine. Bonds are what people call it, he said, mild, when the truth is bigger than their language. The floor tilted. No. My breath stuttered. A muscle under my ribs misfired. Nothing more. My heartbeat gave a hard, inexplicable jerk, like it had remembered a step I didn't teach it. No. Not this. Not here. Nice speech, I said, and heard the scrape of my own voice where humor ought to be. We're on water break. Then don't waste it. He stepped aside, granting me the room as if it had always been mine, as if I'd been measured and found, not wanting. I'll observe. Of course he would. Leaders love to observe when their presence makes the air heavier. I turned back to the platform. Pairs, I said, and my voice was steady. Rotate partners. If you're comfortable, you're learning nothing. They scrambled into motion. I moved among them, correcting grips, knocking a kneecap with the side of my boot. To force a stance, letting my hands do the talk my mouth didn't trust right then. Behind me, Maer's attention pressed like a palm between my shoulder blades. Not oppressive, just present. The room was noisier now, but the noise blurred at the edges, like I'd moved underwater. I don't believe in fate, But when I caught his gaze once more, just once, across a river of bodies and breath, the hall narrowed to a line between us, a string drawn so tight it sang. My heart jerked again. No, this isn't. I exhaled hard enough to cut it off, to sharpen the world back into the shape I require to move through it. Steel, wood, muscle, sweat, choices, not stories. Eyes up, I told a kid who kept flinching. The fight's not on the floor. Yes, coach. When I looked back to the doorway, Maer had stepped inside the hall. He leaned one shoulder against the post, easy as a promise, and watched. Every part of me that understands danger understood this. Something had entered the room and changed the rules. I don't run from that. I don't run at it either. I measure it. I mark where it lives in my body. And then, I do my job. Again, I said to the room. We moved. The platforms creaked like old ships in a waking sea. The bell forgot itself completely. I kept my eyes off the cliff and on the work, on the only fairy tale I've ever trusted, the one where you build the ending with your hands. If looks could tear flesh, we'd both be getting buried. The training yard was an open square of packed earth ringed by low walls and higher opinions. Morning light broke along the eaves and poured itself onto the ground until every footprint turned honest. Wooden dummies stood like patient sinners at confession. Spectators perched on railings and stacked crates. Young fighters with bright mouths and louder elbows. A few elders with faces creased like old maps. And along the shade line, 3 advisors in pale coats, thin as blades and twice as fussy. I'd asked for the yard because walls make people brave in the wrong way. Out here, there's nowhere to hide what you are. Pairs, I barked, and bodies moved. I drove them hard and didn't apologize for it. We drilled until their lungs turned into instruments they didn't know they could play. I cut their stance with a word, built it again with a touch. If voice didn't work, I used silence. If silence didn't work, I used the ground. I gave Rin and the cocky senior alpha from yesterday to each other and told them to be polite about their mutual embarrassment. Omegas rotated faster, short bursts, sharp angles, no heroics. An Omega who thinks endurance is the same as stubbornness learns the difference on their first real day in the world. Again, I said, when again had become a kind of prayer. The yard answered with grunts and dust and a rhythm goldsmiths would envy. Behind the second ring, a pocket of laughter bubbled up, young, pointed. I cut a glance that way. A boy with a mouth like trouble was shadow sparring too fancy for his feet. His friend snorted when he tripped himself. Stand, I said, not loudly. The word took its shoes off and still crossed the distance. He scrambled up, cheeks hot. Coach, your stance is an apology, I said. Quit apologizing. If you're going to take space, take it on purpose. He squared. Better. Fear behaves when it has a job. A soft cough snapped the attention of those who needed excuses to stop moving. One of the advisors had stepped forward, the narrow one with a fox's smile and a ledger tucked against his ribs. Coach Cass, he said. The clan head asked that instruction avoid unnecessary severity. I smiled without showing teeth. And yet here we are. We value discipline, he said, eyes cutting to the youngest in the crowd, calculated sympathy. So do I said. That's why they're here and not asleep. A ripple of laughter, half nervous, half grateful, ran through the youths. The advisor's smile thinned to a thread. Resume, I said, and the yard remembered to be a yard. By the third round of drills, the sun had worked its way under everyone's skin. I called for a water break and scanned the perimeter out of habit. The gate stood open to the lane beyond, where a dog slept like a piece of discarded rope, and a woman hawked apricots the color of coins. Wind threaded the smell of fruit through sweat and earth until the whole morning felt almost kind. Coach Cass. His voice could pour oil on a storm. Maer came through the gate without ceremony, a simple white shirt again. Cuffs rolled, a dark vest that made him look more human than thrown. 3 heartbeats behind him, the other advisors fell into shadow like obedient knives. The yard stilled. Not stopped, the kind of still that happens when you press a hand to a racing horse and feel it choose not to run you through the fence. He nodded to the fighters, then to me. I'll observe. You'll do what you want, I said. You usually do. A near imperceptible pause. Then that almost smile I was beginning to suspect he kept like a weapon in a high drawer. He turned to the nearest cluster of kids. "How is he?" he asked, mild. "Terrifying," Rin said. "Reflex first, then flushed. Effective. Both can be true," Maer said, and turned back in time to catch me look away. I should have left it there. I could have left it there. But leaving things is a habit for men who don't mind watching them rot. Back on the line, I called. "We're moving to contact." The advisors shifted, a little moth fret of disapproval. "Clan head," the fox smile murmured. "Perhaps the head would prefer to—" "Stay," Maer said. "If I'm in the way, Coach Cass will tell me." I arched a brow. "Unlikely you've heard me run out of words." His mouth quirked. "A comfort. We built the circle. 20 paces across, 2 paces of air between spectators and the line. Fighters stood while dust settled around their ankles like a patient threat. Rules," I said. "No cuts, no biting, no preening. You land clean, you help your partner up. If you want to perform, join theater. If you want to fight, take a breath." I stepped back to let the pairs crash into their lessons. A rhythm developed. Impact, adjusting breath, impact, gratitude disguised as insult. I moved to the slowest, turned bodies into levers, told a boy to quit being a door and be a hinge. "Coach Cass," Maer said, not loud. A word. He was still standing at the line, but his attention was coiled like a hand on a low door handle. Not yet, but soon. I didn't go to him. If he wanted my time inside the circle, he could step into it. He did. Silence came down, not like a curtain, but like a held inhale. The fighters drew back without being told. The advisors looked on as if a delicate vase had been placed on a table already listing. Maer stopped an arm's length from me. His eyes were summer dark. They held 1,000 yards, and right now, me. "You push them hard," he said. "I push them as far as they can go without breaking," I said. "Then I stand there and see if they walk." "You mock bonds," he said. "Not a question." "I mock surrender," I said. "Of any kind." A corner of his mouth lifted. "You wear defiance like a ring. You wear authority like a shirt," I said. "It fits. Don't expect me to iron it." The laughter that punched the yard had teeth and delight both. It cut cleanly into the advisor's tight little airs. Maer's brows tipped up, then smoothed again so fast I thought I'd imagined it. "You lead with fear," he said, softer. "I lead with reality," I said. "Fear just gets there first." His gaze slid over the ring, the kids, the waiting, and returned to me with something I didn't want a name for. "Then show me reality." There it was, the line, thrown down between us like a ribbon over a blade. "You sure?" I said. "Your council will file paperwork. I hired you to make them better," he said. "Start with me." A ragged cheer went up, half scandal, half worship. The advisors exchanged looks that could curdle milk. We stepped to opposite edges of the circle. Dust rose in a polite little cloud, then decided it was better to settle elsewhere. I rolled my shoulders and mapped the ache from yesterday. Maer took off his vest, handed it to the fox smile without looking, and undid his. Cuffs with long fingers that made something in my chest tighten like a bad knot. We bowed, small, practical. The sun moved a finger width across the sky. We moved. He came in quiet, which I respected. A leader who thinks noise is power has never had to win without a crowd. He tested distance with a half step and a ghost of a feint at my left. I didn't bite. When he shifted weight to commit, I saw it. Not in his eyes, but in the lines of his ankles. I pivoted, let him pass the empty space where I used to be, and touched the back of his shoulder hard enough to promise worse. He recovered fast. He didn't chase the moment he'd lost. He built a new one. 2 strikes later, he grazed my ribs. Not an accident. The yard gasped like one throat. "You command with a soft voice," I said, breath unruffled. "Hoping I'll flinch?" "You're flinching," he said, just as mild, from the idea that I won't. We traded, steps, pressure, questions without punctuation. I put a hand to his wrist and felt a pulse that matched my own when it shouldn't have. He shifted, freed himself without the ugly wrench you see from men who fight the world the way they fight doors, by breaking them. I was impressed. I didn't say it. Dust filmed our boots. Sweat found our temples. He landed a clean touch to my shoulder. I took his balance from his knee. He rolled, came up in one breath, eyes bright, not with hunger for my throat, but with something that did a worse job of being safe. We broke apart, circled, and every kid in the yard leaned in until their shadows overlapped like a single bruise. Yield? He asked lightly. Ask me that when you earn it, I said, smiling for real for the first time. He came fast then, not reckless, but committed, and I let him take the center while I made the edge into a tool. Our shoulders brushed once. It felt like taking a bite out of lightning and remembering you used to like the taste. I caught his forearm and he mine, 2 lines in tension, and for one useless second the world narrowed to skin and breath and the exact distance of his mouth from a smart remark. The crowd didn't breathe. Neither did I. We disengaged in the same instant, clean. No one had the right to claim blood or pride. The ring snapped back into existence around us, relieved to remember it was dirt. Maer lifted a hand. Not victory, not peace. Acknowledgement. Enough, he said. Enough, I agreed, and found myself smiling like a man who'd just robbed a house and discovered the owner left him a note that said, "Do it again." Applause rippled, uneven but honest. The advisors didn't clap, paper doesn't, but they looked slightly less like lemons. Rin whooped once, then coughed to cover for it. Maer stepped closer, close enough that the yard could pretend not to listen and still hear everything. You don't bow, he murmured. I don't kneel, I said. Different verbs. The difference matters to you, he said. Everything does, I said. If you stand long enough. He studied my face like a road he'd chosen before seeing the hills. Train them, he said. Train me when needed. But understand this, I won't let this yard teach brutality. Strength without judgment is just noise, I finished, and hated how the words tasted like we'd share them later. A breath of amusement touched his mouth. Then we agree on the noise, I said. The rest is a war of definition. He nodded once. A war, then. He turned and walked out of the circle, stepping into shadow with the easy authority of a man who knows the shadow is his. I stood in the sun and listened to my heartbeat count the cost of something I hadn't bought yet. Pairs, I called, when I could trust my voice not to betray anything but command. Reset. If your lungs aren't burning, your feet are lying. They moved, laughing, groaning, awake. The yard lived again. If looks could tear flesh, we'd both be in pieces. Instead, we were something worse, something better, matched. The worst part is the way he smiles when I lose my temper. Maer's office looked like it had been carved out of the word authority. Dark wood paneled the walls, polished until the reflections of lamps gleamed like molten gold. A long table stretched beneath the windows, papers aligned in perfect angles that screamed discipline. There wasn't a single loose object in sight. Everything in here had a place, a purpose, and the weight of judgment. I sprawled into the nearest chair as if I owned the place, which I absolutely didn't. My boots hit the edge of the rug, a fine weave I was half tempted to scuff just to see if anyone would gasp. Maer stood behind the desk, tall and composed, adjusting a ledger without actually needing to. The man radiated patience like a blade radiates sharpness, effortless, dangerous. He didn't look at me at first. That was the worst insult, being treated like scenery. So, I said, breaking the silence because silence was starting to feel like losing. You dragged me here to talk paperwork? My favorite. Maer's eyes lifted at last, steady and dark. Your contract. You've read it? I skimmed it, I said. Skimming saves lives. The corner of his mouth twitched, though it wasn't amusement. It states clearly that you are to train our young fighters in discipline, coordination, and restraint. You are not to change protocol, override my counsel, or challenge authority without consent. Restraint? I leaned back, lacing my hands behind my head. That's funny. Thought you hired me because I don't do restraint. You are here, he said evenly, because this clan values strength. But strength without boundaries destroys more than it protects. You will respect the lines drawn. The calm in his tone made my hackles itch worse than yelling ever could. You really think a sheet of rules is going to leash me? It already has, he said. You signed. That smile again, the one that pressed every wrong button in me. Cool, certain, like I was a wolf who just walked into his pen. I felt my jaw tighten. Listen, I agreed to teach, not to grovel. Don't mistake my presence here for obedience. His voice sharpened by a fraction, like steel under velvet. You may be an alpha Cass, but here. He tapped the desk once, sharp. I am the head. This is my clan. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, eyes locked with his. Fine, be the head. Sit in your chair, shuffle papers, look dignified. But don't think for a second that I'll bend my spine for anyone. The advisors would have gasped, but no one else was here. Just him and me, and the tension thick enough to choke on. For a moment, I thought he'd snap, raise his voice, prove the iron under that composure. Instead, he smiled again, soft, infuriating. Then we understand each other. That almost unraveled me, more than shouting would have. I wanted to throw something across the pristine desk, just to see him flinch. I wanted to drag that calm right off his face. I wanted nothing. Nothing at all. You think you've got me figured out, I muttered. I don't presume, Maer said. I observe. And what I observe is a man who fights shadows harder than enemies. The hit landed sharper than I expected. I felt it in the ribs I'd bruised yesterday, in the place beneath anger I didn't want touched. I stood, the chair scraping against the rug. You want me to teach your people? Fine, they'll learn. But don't mistake that for loyalty. Not to you, not to this clan, and not to whatever fairy tales you tell about bonds. Something flickered in his eyes, too quick to name, too sharp to be pity. Belief is optional, he said quietly. Performance is not. I stalked toward the door. His calm followed like a second skin I couldn't shake off. My hand hit the latch and paused, against my own will. Cass. The sound of my name in his voice was heavier than I expected. I didn't turn. What? You can resist me all you like, he said. But don't resist yourself. The line is thinner than you think. My chest tightened, a mix of fury and something I refused to name. I yanked the door open. Save your wisdom, clan head. I don't buy it. I slammed the door behind me hard enough to make the advisors outside scatter. And yet, walking away, the echo of his smile still burned at the back of my skull, daring me to prove him wrong. I swore I'd never snap. But he fell into my arms, and I fell with him. The road out of the clan curved along the mountain's shoulder, like a ribbon pressed into bark. Pines stitched the air with sharp green, and farther down a river scratched its knuckles over stones. We'd left the noise of the yard behind for a quiet that made honesty feel heavier. I walked ahead with Rin and two others, eyes working the tree line. Maer took the rear with a pair of guards, speaking in low tones that sounded like the shape of decisions. Sunlight stuttered between branches. The path widened to pass an old shrine. A fox carved out of weather-blackened wood, its paint worn to memory. Water? Rin asked. After the bend, I said. Low ground makes us slow. I didn't hear the first arrow. I heard the wrong kind of silence break. Down. I roared, but the word had to run to catch up with the world. The woods split along seams I hadn't marked. Figures in mottled gray slipped from between the pines, a dozen at least, blades like arguments no one planned to lose. The first guard went hard to a knee, a bolt in his shoulder. Another veered to cover Maer, and the path narrowed to coin width. Hired work. Not messy enough to be panic. Not clean enough to be honor. I took the nearest man's wrist with 2 fingers and a promise, and turned his, knife against his grip. He screamed, dropped it, met my elbow on the way down. Pairs. I snapped out of habit, which would have been funny if anyone had time to laugh. Watch your... Heat punched the air. Not heat, wrong word. A ripple. It slid over my skin with the exact weight of a memory I didn't own. I looked back. The attacker who'd gotten past me reached for Maer, and stopped, jammed mid-motion like a clock that forgot how to tick. Maer's head was down, breath ragged, one hand braced against the shrine's stone base. A glyph flared under his palm, brief and vicious, like lightning trying to write a name. It bit the man's shadow and threw him backward. Magic. Not the stage kind. The kind that made the world look left when you told it to look right. Head. I barked. Rin ducked on reflex as a sapling cracked from a blade. I took 2 steps to the right, and the third step opened into a trap I hadn't seen. A wire at ankle height, fine as hair. I twisted, momentum meeting pine bark, and came up with soil under my nails and a mouthful of blood that wasn't mine. Cass, Rin's voice. I'm breathing, I said, and stood into another man, shoulder to chest. He stank of oil and bad sleep. I folded him over my hip, sent him to meet the ground he'd insulted. A bolt sang. Maer staggered as it grazed his side. Too close, too bright. The sound he made wasn't pain, it was containment. He reached for the shrine again, and the glyph this time didn't obey. It spit a hard white spark, then guttered. His control, tight, deliberate, slipped a hair. I felt it. The drop wasn't visible. It was scent and gravity, and the muscle-deep knowledge that something in the room had decided to stop pretending we were civilized. The air thickened with the copper-green edge of storm. My skin prickled in anticipation I hated and recognized. His instincts rolled out like a tide changing its mind. Rin, to the rocks, I snapped. Guard the kids, now. I crossed the path in 3 strides and caught Maer as his knees forgot their purpose. He was hot, not fever hot, but cycle hot. The kind that turns breath into fuel and skin into a map with only one route. His pupils were blown wide. He looked at me and didn't see anything except me. Don't, I said, low. I set him against the shrine's base and pressed a hand to his shoulder. The other hovering like it wasn't sure if I'd decided to be careful. Stay with me. The world on the edges continued to misbehave. Steel, shouts, the river growing louder as if water could be convinced to listen. But within arm's reach, reality narrowed to his breath. I have it, he said, and he did not. It was bravado the way a dam is bravado, one hairline away from being a story. Look at me, I said, not the pull. Me. The stupid, treacherous thing in my chest answered to his scent like it paid rent there. A thread in my spine drew tight enough to sing, then trembled. Instinct pressed its mouth to my ear and told me I already knew how to go still and fall apart at the same time. No, I told the voice. We don't do that. A man came at us from the left. I didn't look. Maer's breath was a rope and I was a hand. Let go and we'd both drown. I pivoted blind, brought my heel up, and knocked the incoming blade into the shrine's stone. Sparks spat. I slammed the attacker's head against wood. He dropped. Maer's fingers closed on my forearm, hard enough to bruise through leather. The contact was a circuit completing. Heat cracked along my nerves and lit every closed door in me. My control flexed and tried to pick up too much weight. Something in the lift gave. Cass, he said. My name taken apart and rebuilt into something I wasn't ready to hear. This isn't how we do it, I said. We don't let it pick for us. Then choose, he whispered. I did the ugliest, bravest thing I could. I stayed. I moved in, close enough that the world couldn't get between us. I put my forehead to his, and the smell of pine resin and the clean white heat of him made my mouth go dry. I kept my hands where they were safe, shoulders, jaw, crown, touches that meant, I'm here, I'm a wall, breathe. I gave him my voice like a rope. In, I said, out. Match me. His breath caught my cadence and fought it, and then matched it like it had always been mine to keep. The pull eased a fraction. The cycle didn't recede, it reoriented, like a river agreeing to flow in the channel you dug with your body. Around us, the hired blades realized leaders bleed and smelled opportunity. 3 came together. Thinking numbers erase skill. They don't. I shifted to put my body between the threat and the only thing in the world I refused to lose. I used the shrine's corner to limit angles, the slick ground to make their footing, lie, and the fact that they wanted me dead more than they wanted to be alive. 2 fell badly. The 3rd saw his own ending and ran into it anyway. Rin, I called. Status. Breathing. He yelled back, which is not a status but was the best kind at the moment. They're pulling, left flank breaking. Good boy, I muttered. And to Maer, stay with me. His lashes fluttered. He swallowed, and his throat worked, and the sound it made was going to live inside my hands for longer than I wanted to admit. The bolt graze on his side leaked red into white. He tried to twist toward me like the rightness was a heat source. Don't move, I said, and heard the rough edge in my own voice. It sounded like gravel and prayer. I shouldn't have touched his face. I did. My palm fit his cheek like I'd practiced it, and the madness pressed closer, interested, hopeful. He leaned into it, a small destroying motion. My body wanted a future it hadn't earned. My mind, as always, wanted a fight. Cass, he said again, more himself this time, softer. I'm not afraid. Good, I said, and my laugh came out wrong. One of us shouldn't be. The last of the hired men made practice of retreat. The woods took them back without comment. Somewhere, a hawk wrote an opinion in the sky and didn't share. I checked the guard with the shoulder bolt, conscious, cursing, which meant fine. I signaled Rin to hold the path. Then I looked down at the problem no rulebook had prepared me for. Maer's pulse steadied under my fingers. His gaze cleared the way a window clears when you remember you can open it. Heat still ran under his skin, but it no longer tried to eat the horizon. He focused on my mouth like words lived there that could fix the world. He stopped, swallowed. Humor tugged, fragile and real. Very close. Blame your timing, I said, and your idiotic tendency to bleed in my vicinity. His smile cut through the last of the panic like a clean blade. The pull, fate's favorite cheap trick, brushed my ribs again, testing. I could have let it right us. I didn't. I held the pen. We will need to, he winced as the graze reannounced itself. Address this. The wound? I asked, knowing he meant the other thing. Both, he said. I nodded once. I didn't trust myself with more. On your feet? He tried. The world tilted for him, and for a heartbeat. I felt the tilt answer in me that matched stupidity. I caught him fast. His breath hitched against my throat. For one violent second, everything in me that had ever loved control stepped aside, and a simpler animal took the room. Take, claim, end the argument. I set him back against the stone instead. You're safe, I said. I'll keep it that way. He closed his eyes. Relief loosened his mouth. Pride tightened it again. You stayed. As experiments go, I said, dry. I've done dumber. And better? He asked, eyes opening. Ask anyone I fought, I said. They'll say no. Rin edged closer, dirt-smeared and grinning with too many teeth. They ran, he reported. We scared them off. We gave them a better schedule, I said. Maer needs a medic. Maer's gaze didn't leave mine. I need, he said, calm returned by degrees, for you to keep doing exactly what you just did. Stand between me and the worst of it. Use your voice. Don't let me lie to myself. That a request, I asked, or an order? Both, he said. I should have told him I don't take orders. I should have made a joke sharp enough to draw a little blood and prove the point. I'll manage, I said instead, and something in his eyes said he'd heard what I hadn't meant to say. I've spit on every myth since I learned what they cost. But as we started back up the path, Rin ranging wide, the guards watchful, the fox shrine looking like it knew more than it would admit, the world sat a fraction closer to true than it had an hour ago. I don't believe in fairy tales. I'm just living in one. I expected shouting. I expected hatred, but he just looked at me and said, prove it. The recovery room wore twilight like a habit. Curtains filtered the late light to the color of old paper. The air smelled faintly of clean cloth and pine resin. Someone had left a bowl of water and a folded towel on the low table. As if the room anticipated needs before the people inside did, Maer lay propped against a wedge of pillows, shirt open at the side where the bolt had kissed him and left its warning. The graze wasn't deep, but it had a temper. A medic had stitched the angriest part shut with neat, unshowy care, then vanished. The way good medics do, quietly, before gratitude makes anyone clumsy. I closed the door behind me and let the latch find itself. My boots felt loud on the rugs. I set my hands on the back of the chair at his bedside and thought about 10 different things I could say that would keep me safe from the one that mattered. He blinked slowly, bringing me into focus. No panic, no accusation, a breathing pause in the middle of a long sentence. You're awake, I said, and heard the gravel in my voice. Congratulations on your continued existence. Likewise, he said, softer than the room, but heavier than the bed. Sit. I stand better, I said. Then stand, he murmured, a ghost of a smile. But stay. That landed in me with the precision of a thrown pin. His gaze moved to the towel. I took the hint, poured water, wrung cloth, set the bowl aside. My hand hovered a heartbeat longer than necessary over his ribs, and then I remembered I had a job and did it. Careful pressure, clean, clean again. His breath hitched once. Pain, not fear. I marked the difference, and the part of me that counts victories took note. When I finished, I tucked the towel under the bowl and stepped back. Silence filled the space I'd left, then refused to leave. "You're not going to say it," I said. "Say what?" His voice was steady, but his eyes were not kind. They were honest. That I crossed lines. That I should have handled it better. He studied me like a roadmap you only unfold when it's already raining. "You did cross lines," he said. "You also kept me from crossing worse ones." The choke I didn't let happen sat behind my tongue and sulked. "I expected you to shout," I said, "or to order me out." His mouth made a small, infuriatingly gentle curve. "You like fights you can win. Shouting is one of them." I laughed once brittle. "So you won't oblige?" "I'll oblige with truth." His eyes did not flinch from mine. "You acted like an animal." There it was, the blade. "And I," he added, before I could wear the insult like armor, "am not your prey." Heat flashed under my skin, reflex and shame, and something older that hated both. "I didn't, you didn't," he said, and the softness of that cut deeper than any shout. "You didn't take, you didn't decide for me. You stood there and held the wall with your body until I could hold it with mine, but I could feel it in you. The want to end the argument with instinct. Don't insult either of us by pretending you couldn't." My jaw worked. The chair back creaked under my hands. I wanted to pick a fight with the door, the ceiling, the laws of chemistry. Instead, I said, "And if I had, then I would have recovered and made sure you never had the chance to try again," he said calmly. "Because I'm not afraid of you, Cass. I'm angry at you. Different weather." I looked at the floor to get away from what was happening in his eyes, and found my own boots, exactly where I put them, exactly the problem. "What do you want?" I asked. "That isn't a sermon." His answer was clean as water. "Proof." "Of what?" "That you can be better than the story you've told yourself to survive." Quiet laid down between us, not heavy, just wide. "Prove it," he said again. "Not a dare, a task. With the small things. Stay, help, learn where your hands belong. Use your voice like you did on the road. Not to command, to anchor." For a second, my body tried to slip into old grooves, deflect, mock, scorch the earth so nothing could grow. The grooves didn't fit as well as they used to. "I don't do caretaking," I said. The word stumbled, like it was wearing someone else's boots. "You do survival," he said. "This is that, for both of us." I set the chair down and sat. The room allowed it. My knees felt too high, my elbows too sharp. I poured water into a cup and held it out. He didn't try to take it, not at first. He looked at my hand until my hand remembered how to be steady. He drank. A line at the corner of his mouth loosened. "This part," I said, because if I didn't speak the truth it was going to chew through my ribs from the inside. "This is new." "I know," he said. "It looks good on you." "Don't," I warned, "because praise is a spice." He smiled with his eyes and let it die there. We didn't talk for a while. I adjusted the pillows when his shoulder tightened, because the way his breath lifted told me he wouldn't ask. I slid the cup to the table where he could reach it without turning wrong. I picked up the ledger someone had left and put it farther away because he kept looking at it like responsibility was a rope around his throat. "Rest," I said. "Order?" he asked. "Observation," I said. "You're terrible at letting anyone else carry the weight. And you're excellent at assuming you have to." "Comes with the skull," I said, tapping mine. "Thick." A knuckle rapped the door. It opened a cautious inch, and Rin slipped in with a tray that smelled like broth and apology. He took one look at the two of us and grinned until he remembered he shouldn't. "Brought you soup, head. And for Coach, tea." "Tea," I repeated, horrified. What did I do to deserve this? Rin bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. "The kitchen says you're not allowed coffee after you tried to arm wrestle a water urn." "I won," I said. "You flooded the hall," he said. Maer's mouth twitched. "Leave the tea," he told Rin, like mercy. Rin set the tray down and sidled toward the gap. "Oh, also, word in the yard is the beast's been tamed." His ears went red as soon as he said it. I mean, sorry, I didn't. Out, I said, pointing, while Maer tried very hard and failed to look stern. When the door shut, the quiet it left behind had laughter edged into it. Beast, I muttered. Charming. You do cultivate a reputation, Maer said. I prefer Storm, I said. Beasts get collars, and storms get names, he said. Pick one you can live with. The soup cooled into the kind of warm that forgives slow appetites. I fed him the line nobody sees. Lift the spoon. Wait, watch the breath. Don't rush the swallow. He let me, which was the real miracle. When he winced at a pull along the stitch, I paused and set the spoon down and waited until his mouth remembered how to unclench. You're good at this, he said eventually. I am bad at this, I corrected. I am merely paying attention. That's most of it, he said. It shouldn't have to be, I said. We went like that for a while, trading small truths across a narrow bed. I refilled the water. He let his eyes close, then forced them open out of habit. I caught the habit by the scruff and set it outside. Sleep, I said. Or I'm telling your advisors you cried during training reels. He huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. Monstrous. I've been called worse, I said. Usually by people I like less. He didn't answer. Sleep did. I sat there and listened to his breathing choose the long road. Something in me unclenched by increments I didn't feel until the absence made space for a different kind of ache. Not hunger. Not panic. A wanting that didn't end in teeth. Someone passed in the hall and snickered, muffled, careful. The beast bites. Another voice. Not the head. He doesn't. Footsteps. Fading. I should have bristled. I should have opened the door and given them a lesson on the uses of silence and doors. Instead, I reached for the towel, cooled it in the bowl, wrung it out, and touched it to Maer's brow as if the gesture had always been waiting in my hand. His face softened under it. Mine did something similar where no one could see. Prove it, he'd said. So I stayed. I watched the windows fade from paper to ink and back again. I took the night in shifts with the slow clock in my chest and set every hour down where he could find it in the morning. And when he stirred at last, eyes clear, pain tamed to an honest companion, I felt the smallest, most dangerous thing snap inside me. Not a restraint, not a rule. A story I'd worn down to a shine. I wasn't just a storm. I could be a harbor too. I always thought strength was holding on. Turned out, it's letting go. Evening rinsed the village in amber. The market woke in a softer register than the yard. Voices bargaining like old friends. Tin bells twitching in the wind. Smoke from grills drawing lines the sun could lean on. Houses stacked themselves along the lane, as if they'd chosen each other on purpose. Someone played a cracked fiddle 2 streets over. A child sang only the chorus of a song like the verses were a secret. I'd meant to pass through. Instead, I ended up under a leaning roof with a hammer and 3 uneven nails. Careful, the old man beneath me said, craning his neck with a theatrical groan. That plank's older than your pride. My pride is low maintenance, I said, setting the nail with 2 taps and a decision. Your roof isn't. He cackled. You hear that, Hara? The feral coach has jokes. From the lane, a woman shouted back. Tell him to fix the hinge next, if his jokes can lift it. I fixed the hinge next. Then a shutter that had survived 3 storms and 1 bad temper. Then I carried 2 buckets from the well, because the girl tasked with it looked at the rope like it owed her money. You pull, I said, setting my hands beside hers, and I'll pretend I'm not helping. She snorted, which I took as acceptance, and the water came up laughing at both of us. Word moved sideways in small places. By the time the second bucket kissed the rim, a ring of kids had collected in my shadow, like sparrows dared by crumbs. Rin hovered on the near edge, trying to look like he wasn't proud of me, and failing with both eyebrows. Coach, one brave boy said, is it true you broke a man's nose by sneezing? No, I said. It was a cough. Gasps. Laughter. Someone tried to imitate the cough and almost fell in the well. Lesson 1, I said, grabbing the back of the imitator's tunic before gravity could stage a demonstration. If you're going to lean over danger, tie your belt to something that likes you. I like me, the kid said, solemn. That's a start, I said. Find a post that agrees. I set the buckets on a yoke. and for a moment let the weight arrange my thoughts. It found new places to live along my shoulders, places that had been busy with other burdens. The smell here wasn't sweat and iron, it was fruit warmed by day and grain remembering harvest. "Show us a move," another boy said, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Just a little one. Not the nose one. A little one," I repeated gravely. "Fine. Step in." He stepped, nervous and thrilled. I put 2 fingers against his wrist. "Feel your center?" Yes?" He lied. "Honest tries win faster," I said. "Bend your knees, hips under. Now I'm going to push. Your job is to not be a door." "A hinge," he said, bright. "A hinge," I agreed, and pushed. He gave, he didn't topple, and for one pure second his eyes did the thing eyes do when a body learns it can be a home. The kids clapped as if he'd flown. "Again," he said, fierce with joy. We did it again, and again with 2 of them, then with a girl who didn't ask, but stepped in like asking had never done her much good. Rin showed a wrist escape and added unnecessary drama. I corrected him with the back of my fingers, and he performed a bow so ridiculous the old man from the roof declared him a festival. "You're different today," Hara said, hands on hips, watching me set the buckets on her stoop. Not suspicious. Assessing. "Roof's not leaking," I said. "That will do it." "Not the roof," she said. "You must be the tea," I said, and Rin choked on air behind me. Parents drifted over when they realized the grim coach hadn't eaten anyone. A woman pressed a skewer of grilled fish into my palm with the kind of generosity that makes refusal. An insult, a boy with paint on his fingers, offered me a pebble with a fox scratched into it. I put the pebble in my pocket like a spell. Soft things have their own armor, it just looks less dramatic going on. Laughter stirred the market when I ducked under a banner and smacked my head on it anyway. "Careful, storm," someone called. "The sky's lower in here." "Tell the sky to mind its manners," I said, rubbing my temple to the soundtrack of small delighted cruelties. "Storm," a girl repeated, as if trying on a name to see if it fit her mouth. "We called you Beast." "I heard," I said. "Beast gets collars. Storm gets a window closed and a story later. I prefer the story." "Does the story have soup?" Rin asked, already stealing a dumpling. "It does for people who don't eat like thieves," Hera scolded, then slid me a bowl anyway. "Here, for the roof." I ate leaning against a wall that had seen more lives than I'd punched in the face. Across the lane, Maer stood at the mouth of an alley, one shoulder to the post, speaking to a vendor in a tone that turned bartering into blessing. He wore a simple shirt again. He did that on purpose here, and it worked. The market didn't stiffen around him the way rooms did. It breathed. He didn't come over. He watched. I pretended not to notice and failed. A heat that wasn't fever worked under my skin, the kind that has less to do with fire and more with the idea of a hearth. The Fox Smile advisor slid into my patch of shade with the talent of someone who collects overheard sentences like stamps. Ledger tucked to ribs, eyes doing that thing where they look kind while measuring your jugular. "Coach Cass," he said as if we were alone. "The village enjoys a spectacle. They enjoy roofs that don't pour on beds," I said. "The spectacle is free and profitable," he said, gaze flicking to where Maer's attention still held. "Your stock is rising. Throw me on the exchange," I said. "Buy low." He smiled like a blade being sheathed. "You've noticed, of course, how the head delegates, how he spends capital. The clan needs teeth as well as tongue, a leader who can be both." The dumpling stopped being good halfway down. "Is this the part where you imply the chair is empty if I want it?" He looked offended by my lack of ceremony. I would never be so crass. I only observe. And what I observe is a man the yard respects and the market finds approachable. "Approachable," I repeated. Deadpan. "Because I carry water, because you carry weight," he said, soft. "And because you choose to set it down where it can be seen." The children's laughter ran up the lane like a rumor and broke against us. Across the way, Maer finished with the vendor and tipped his head to an old woman like it cost him nothing. He caught my eye once. No message, no command. Just the line between us remembering it exists. I wiped my hands on a cloth and faced the advisor fully. "Let me be educational, please," he said, which meant no. "If I wanted a throne," I said, "I'd have built one out of people's backs a long time ago. It's faster." It's also garbage. Your head has something better than fear and cheaper than flattery. And I'm not interested in replacing him. What is it he has? The advisor asked, curious despite himself. A door he holds open, I said, and the spine to close it when he has to. He studied me the way surgeons study a wound that healed without stitching. You speak as if you've known him longer than a week. I've known men like him for years, I said, mostly because I avoided them. And now? He said, now I'm not avoiding him, I said. Run along and file paperwork. He inclined his head, amused and dangerous both. As you wish. He was gone before the next bell on the breeze. I let my back find the wall again, and my eyes find Maer as if they'd been looking for an excuse. He'd moved closer without moving at all, just by choosing to be in my sightline. He didn't smile. The market did it for him. Kids stormed me again with sticks that wanted to be swords. Coach, show us the spin. No spins, I said. Spins are for dancers and people who want to meet the ground face first. But you spin. Rin tattled. I'm trained, I said. You are chaos on legs. We played anyway, small, contained. I taught them how to move their feet before their hands so they'd still have hands later. I showed a girl how to make her smallness a kind of weapon. I let a boy knock my wrist aside just to watch his face light with a victory he'd translated into his own language. Between drills, Hara pressed a hand to my shoulder, brief and grateful. The old man saluted me with a piece of bread he pretended not to be offering. The market took my edges and sanded them down just enough to leave skin. Maer came near when the light decided it wanted to be gold instead of work. He stopped an arm's length away, like on the day in the yard, and let the space between us do half the talking. You've been busy, he said. Your roofers are lazy, I said. They're old, he said. They should have trained their replacements, I said. Perhaps they just did, he said, watching the kids chase Rin up a barrel and down Dignity. I looked at him then, and the look cracked something fresh and good. I'm not interested in your chair, I said, unprompted. I didn't offer, he said, tone level. Your counsel did, I said. He hummed once, a sound made of shrug and ledger and long memory. They like to test what moves when pushed. I don't, I said. Unless it's a roof. His mouth might have been a smile, if you squinted at it sideways. Noted. We stood there, without filling the air with worse words. The market held us like a pocket holds a coin, ordinary and valuable at once. Walk? He asked finally. Carry, I corrected, lifting one bucket because I'd left myself no excuses. He took the other without a question. We walked the lane like we'd been doing it for years, the weight swinging easy between us, the quiet not empty but shared. Soft, I thought, and the word didn't taste like weakness. It tasted like a door that didn't slam in a storm. Maybe I'd always had the spine for this. I just never put it down where people could see it. When he said, "Now I'm ready," I understood there was no choice left to make, and none needed. The clan slept. The market's laughter had folded itself into quiet, and the lamps along the lane burned low, embers in jars. I climbed the inner stairs toward Maer's quarters with a step that wasn't mine. It belonged to something larger, a rhythm older than decision. His door was half open. A candle burned low on the table inside, throwing long strokes of gold across the walls. The air smelled of beeswax and pine smoke, softened by the faintest trace of the salve used on his wound. He was waiting, not standing, not pacing like he sometimes did when his thoughts were too restless for stillness. Tonight, he sat on the edge of his bed, robe loose at the shoulders, posture carved from exhaustion and choice. His gaze lifted to meet mine as if he'd known the moment I'd touched the threshold. "Close it," he said. Not command, not plea. A line of trust drawn in the dark. I closed it. The latch sounded louder than the candle flame. For a long beat we did nothing but breathe. My pulse remembered the rhythm from the shrine, from the road, from every stupid moment I'd promised myself I wouldn't fall into this story. He broke the silence first. "I held it back for so long," he said, voice low enough to make the flame sway. The pull, the name everyone wants to give it. I thought if I ignored it, I could keep my balance. His fingers flexed once against the coverlet, steadying himself on fabric instead of me. But I don't want to fight it anymore. Now I'm ready. Something cracked under my ribs that didn't feel like breaking, more like space. I moved closer, slow, like approaching an animal that was choosing not to bite. "You're sure?" His mouth curved, gentle, stubborn. "I'm sure. I want this. Not because instinct tells me. Because I do." That was the only answer I'd accept. And the only one dangerous enough to undo me. I sat beside him. The mattress dipped, our shoulders almost brushing. His warmth was immediate, real in a way memory and fantasy could never counterfeit. My hand hovered between us, clumsy for once. "I was afraid," I said, the words dragging out like stones. "Afraid that if I gave in, I'd lose myself, that I'd turn into nothing but hunger." I let the air out slow, like a man diffusing his own weapon. "But maybe I was wrong, because with you, I don't feel lost, I feel found." His eyes softened, the control there bending but not shattering. He reached, finally, covering my hand with his. "Then don't run from it." The silence after that wasn't empty. It was invitation. I turned to him, and the last distance between us burned away. Our mouths met, not a clash, not a theft, but a meeting in the middle neither of us had dared before. The kiss carried no urgency, no storm. It was steady, deliberate, as if both of us were carving something permanent into the dark. His hand slid up to the back of my neck, not to claim, but to anchor. My fingers found his jaw, tracing the strength he kept hidden under patience. He leaned into the touch, as if it had always belonged there. The candle sputtered. The room leaned closer. We didn't rush it. For once, I had no interest in winning, only in staying. We parted by inches, breath mingling, foreheads close. "Equal," he said softly. "Always," I answered, surprising myself with how easy it was to mean it. He smiled then, the kind that didn't feel like triumph or defense, just release. He shifted, lying back against the pillows, pulling me with him in a gesture so unguarded nearly undid me all over again. I braced one hand beside his head, the other still tangled with his fingers. "Say it again," I murmured, because hearing it once wasn't enough. "I'm ready," he whispered, steady and certain. "With you." The part of me that had always mocked fairy tales finally went quiet. What filled the space instead was simple, choice mirrored in his eyes. Not fate, not chains. Choice. The night held us. Candles burned to stubs, shadows stretched long and soft, and for the first time since, I'd walked into this clan. My body stopped fighting the story it had been written into. I didn't surrender. I didn't win. I belonged. I came into this clan in exile, and I stayed as part of something greater. Dawn washed the rooftops in pale gold. The air was sharp the way only mountain mornings can be, clean enough to make your lungs feel like new. From the highest terrace, the whole village looked like it had been poured out of a story. Smoke curling. From chimneys, voices just beginning to stir, the first trader's cart rattling over stones. I sat on the ledge with my boots dangling into nothing, a mug of bitter tea cooling in my hands. For once, I wasn't running through battle drills in my head or planning which wall to fight next. I was just still. The roof tiles warmed under me as the sun climbed. Below, children's laughter floated up with the smoke. Someone strummed a lazy tune on a stringed instrument. The world felt absurdly like it might forgive me. The door behind me creaked. Maer's footsteps crossed the tiles, unhurried, sure. He didn't ask if he could join me. He sat beside me, robe loose, hair mussed from sleep. The quiet between us was comfortable now, no longer a weapon, no longer a shield. Just quiet. "You look less like a storm this morning," he said, sipping from his own cup. "Storms get tired too," I muttered. "Besides, your people keep feeding me dumplings. Hard to rage on a full stomach." He laughed, low, warm, the kind of sound that settles under your ribs and makes a home there. Then his eyes narrowed with that teasing glint I'd learned to both dread and want. "So tell me, Alpha," he said, tilting his head, "do you still think bonds are just fairy tales?" I should have had a sharp answer. A wall, a joke, a dismissal. But walls lose their use when you've already let someone inside. I looked at him, this man with a soft voice and a spine that could break mountains, who had met my teeth with patience and my fury with calm, who had dared to tell me to be better when I thought I couldn't. And instead of fear, I felt something lighter. Something like belonging. "Yes," I said finally. "I still think they're fairy tales." His brows lifted, amused. I leaned closer, close enough to steal the sunrise out of his eyes. But only if it's a fairy tale with your voice in it. For once, I was the one who smiled first. He shook his head, exasperated and pleased all at once, and nudged his shoulder into mine. We sat like that, side by side on the edge of the world, watching the light spill across the roofs and into every corner we used to keep hidden. For the first time in years, the story I was living didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a choice, and I believed in it.